Well, it is a little after 5 o'clock here, actually, so I'm going to call this Committee of the Whole meeting for the Kalamazoo City Commission to order for Monday, April 6th, 2026. And the first order of business is roll call. Assistant Clerk Shelby.
Commissioner Hess.
Present.
Commissioner Hoffman. Commissioner Pradle.
Present.
Commissioner Slaby.
Present.
Commissioner Wilson.
Present.
Vice Mayor Duncan.
Here.
Mayor Anderson.
Here. Thank you, Clerk Moss. May I have a motion to excuse Commissioner Hoffman?
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Hess.
Seconded.
Supported by Vice Mayor Duncan. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Thank you. Motion passes. I just wanted to say, just before we get started here, it's nice to see my colleagues again. It seems like it's been like a year since we met last time. I don't know why. Is the extra week get thrown in there or something? Just seems like a long time. So I hope everybody had maybe took some time off over a spring break, had a nice Easter yesterday. It's nice to see everybody. And it's nice to see those of you that have joined us for this here in the chambers and our great team here, Manager Hankins and Attorney Leal. So here we go. Next is communications. Manager Hankins, anything?
No.
All right. Now you have an opportunity for public comment for the Committee of the Whole. Just a reminder, for the Committee of the Whole, public comments are 2 minutes. Please state your name and whether you live in the city.
My name is Maddie Jordan Woods, and I live in the city. You have about the flooding on the agenda, but I did not think that there would be an opportunity to speak. And so I'm coming forth. If you say there is an opportunity to speak with the on here, then I'll go sit down. If not, I'd like to let my comments go. So I live at 902 West Patterson, and I am here tonight to ask you guys to support James Baker in coming up with a solution sooner than in the summer on Cobb, Woodward, all up and down Patterson. The flooding is so bad. People are having to go and get more than one sub pump. Our sub pump burnt out. You can go up to look at the house next to me. They pushed it out so it's a river back there. And it is to the point, and there's a lady on Cobb Street, her insurance company is canceling her because we are not in a flood zone. But yet that infrastructure is so old, it is not able to capture when there is a large rain. And to say, well, it only keeps happening, well, it's destroying everything. And it is the utility bills on running a sub pump all night. So I just ask you all he's going to give a presentation. I called him this morning. He said he was doing a presentation. But he also said that it's not in a budget to address this issue. And it is causing the people who are least likely to pay. We're talking about keeping our homes. No, I'm not one of them. I'm thankful. My husband works and I retired. So, but what about the people whose incomes were way low, and it's affecting all of us? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, please.
Can we get that one off? Hi, Caleb Leonard. I live in the city.
They won't be able to hear you at home if you don't talk to the microphone.
I had an accommodation with the city manager to get that light turned off because I'm epileptic, and every time that light's on me, I have a seizure and I can't remember what I say here.
Okay.
So I'm going to step to the side here. I can speak up with the volume. I'm here on behalf of about 200 residents of the Vine community. They have asked me to speak on the topic of the Howard Street crossing from the middle school. It is dangerous. It is on a downhill. The mist has changed based off the elevation shifts. The one crossing guard sign with the flashing lights we have is insufficient. It all goes downhill. Icy conditions go downhill. We can and should do something about this immediately. The additional is West Engine Park. The traffic that is going down there is unrestrained. There are no signs that say stop for pedestrians, just pedestrian signs. We can already get out safety markers. We can do actionable things now to establish what we have, reinforce it, and then grow. I invite you as representatives to join the neighborhood association. They always hold at 6 p.m. on Wednesday for this one, discussing safety and traffic. I also invite you to Kalamazoo Public School board meeting at 7 on Wednesday, because they are also talking about traffic safety. And it would be a wonderful opportunity for both of these bodies to take care of our children. Because I really don't want to introduce our children to Rocky, who is another victim of West Edge. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Seeing no one else, I want to thank those of you that did take the time, made the effort to come here and provide public comments. Just a reminder, there's also an opportunity for public comments at our business meeting that starts at 7. We are now down to our work session. Manager Hankins.
Thank you, Mayor. In recent years, we've been hearing concerns about localized flooding and the role of stormwater system maintenance. And so this work session is intended to provide you with an overview of how our system works, functions, including design standards, maintenance practices, and the things that influence how flooding occurs in our community and what impacts our residents. So with that, I'll turn it over to Director Baker for the presentation and any questions.
Thank you, sir, and welcome, Director Baker.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, City Manager, City Commissioners, for this opportunity to talk on this very, very important subject for our community. Jumping right into the agenda here, we're going to talk about different types of flooding events. We break these up into different types because they have different solutions that we would apply to correct each type of event. I do want to acknowledge how impactful flooding is to our community members. And throughout all this presentation, I'm going to be really focused on some of the engineering dynamics and some of the causes of floods and what those solutions are for each different type of event. I do acknowledge that when we have events, citizens are impacted by that, and they don't take they may not appreciate a concept to say, well, we understand you're flooding, but that's not the problem. It's this problem over here. We're not trying to be unsympathetic to that. We're just engineers, and the work that we do is very specific to the type of that event. So I really want to acknowledge that and honor the experiences that our residents do go through. I also like to say, these events, although I'm breaking them all apart differently for an engineering perspective so we can analyze each one of these events, when a flood happens, they all kind of happen together. And so we're kind of taking a flood event and we're going to cut some cross sections through it so that we can analyze that. I understand that's not how life works. We don't get to just kind of stop life and stop a flooding event and kind of go into the detail. So I'm just kind of giving that background for everyone's appreciation. So kind of starting through flood events, one of our first event is what we call urban non-riverine flood event. And this is essentially a stormwater system that becomes overwhelmed due to either capacity issues or maintenance issues or a combination of all of that. Stormwater systems kind of all throughout our developed area. Kalamazoo City proper, we're responsible for the stormwater system within the city proper. But if you look, our whole metro area really has a stormwater system through it. Outside of City Kalamazoo, that stormwater system's owned, operated, maintained by either the Road Commission, MDOT, or it could be Drain Commissioner. So you see this map, we've got Kalamazoo kind of in the middle. We've got some of our other communities, whether that's Township or Portage kind of around us. Those other communities have those other agencies that are responsible for that stormwater system. We do know that land use impacts stormwater runoff, so that you see areas that are developed have more runoff from storm events. So when we have rain, when it rains on, say, a forest, like at one of our well fields out at El Sabo, there's less water that comes out of that, more water soaks in the ground. We also see, like downtown, we get more runoff because more of those areas are paved. We get about 34 inches of rain a year, and so depending on where we're at, if we're downtown, most of that 34 inches of rain goes right into the storm sewers and is what we're dealing with in a rain event. If we go out to a well field where there's forest, very small amount of that actually gets translated into runoff. The rainfall events themselves are very important to runoff. So we could have a storm that comes through, drops a whole lot of rain in a short amount of time, like a thunderstorm, drops a whole lot of rain in like 15 minutes. That's going to produce a different amount of runoff than a storm that occurs over a whole day. Our stormwater systems are conveyance systems. That means they take rain over a volume of time. So they take volume per unit time to convey it. And you have a very different result when you have, say, 2 inches of rain over a whole day versus 2 inches of rain in an hour. Our stormwater system was designed several years ago. There is certainly maintenance needs that we've got to look at. There's also infrastructure needs that we've got to look at for that overall stormwater system. We worked on a draft business model that we put together last fall that identified maintenance strategies and capital improvement strategies specific to our stormwater system. That also developed a revenue requirement that we could then build into our budgets to create kind of a funding model for that stormwater maintenance. We then used the budget process this year to put those costs beginning in 2026 into a long-term budget using right now Act 51. There's still a need for a long-term funding strategy for stormwater, and that's something we're going to continue to work on in the years to come. Some of the things that we are working on are annual river cleanup events. That's Kalamazoo River, Portage Creek, Axtell Creek, Arcadia Creek, and Davis Creek, where we're come out usually in the spring and do cleanup events of the channels, trash, tires, that sort of thing. We've got a new program, Catch Basin Cleaning and Inspection Program, that's going to launch this year. That's something where City Commission approved some equipment purchases, also approved staffing, and that's going to roll into a program that's going to carry us out for the next 3 years. The stormwater maintenance strategy is going to focus on those catch basins that we talked about, those inlets, actually pulling the covers off, and then going into the chamber itself and cleaning that out. Inspecting that chamber as well with a work order system, and then reporting back defects so that we can continue to build our capital program. This work is going to happen from now through 2029 into 2030. We're going to start in the Burke Acres neighborhood, and we're going to kind of move across the city to the west and then south. So we're starting this program where we started our lead program. That way we have kind of we're already out ahead of ourselves in terms of a lot of the work that's happening at neighborhood levels. So we didn't want to be in the same neighborhoods doing all this work where we're also doing that lead work and we're also doing that gas main work. So this is happening in areas that have already seen that lead work happen. We've got over 11,000 structures that we've got to do this work. That machine that you see in that image, that's the machine that's going to be doing the work. City Commission approved. That's a Vactor truck, so that's going to be going out. We're going to be pulling the covers off, sticking that big elephant trunk down into the hole and sucking all the material out. There's also a work order that's going to do defect codes and track if there's anything wrong with that structure so that can be repaired in the future. We're also going to be sampling 66 outfalls in specific creeks, Axtell Creek, Arcadia Creek, and Davis Creek. We want to talk through some of the solutions that we have in this urban non-riverine flooding scenario. So we've got a lot of rain. The rain comes down faster than what can go into the storm sewer system, and that can be for a number of reasons. It could be there's defects with the storm sewer system itself. Those could be operational or structural defects. It could be things like leaves or dirt over the drains. It could be broken pipes, that sort of thing. We also have programs where you're going to start seeing programs in 2027 where we're going to be doing green infrastructure improvements. So these are some new strategies that we've got just a few in place already We have one on Water Street right by Anna Witten Hall where we've got some stormwater offlining. We're going to see more of these projects coming into our portfolio of work. We're going to do some on Burdick Street. Those are programmed for 2027. These are areas where we'll take flow that was going in the stormwater system and we're going to infiltrate that in areas where we can handle that capacity. We're also doing some targeted work where we're installing Kalamazoo double inlets. So this is where we have areas where the rain comes down so fast, but it can't get into the inlets because the inlets themselves are undersized. So this builds kind of two inlets together. This is a cut view. So the image on the left is you're kind of cut down into the road and you're looking into it. The image on the right would be you're looking top down at it. That picture along the top on the right, that line would be the curb line, and then you see the two inlets that go into these double chambers. If one chamber plugs, there's a cross pipe, it can go to the other one, and then that connects to the storm system. We did this type of project a few years ago at the intersection of Church and Hopkins. There was a lot of localized flooding that was occurring there. It would rain so hard that the water couldn't get into the storm sewers. The adjacent homes were experiencing basement flooding. That was happening during storm events. And so this work was done by city crews over the summer of 2022, and it was very successful in resolving those types of flooding issues. So a lot of work in the pipeline, so to speak, for the storm sewer system. We're going to get out and we're going to clean every structure, over 11,000 structures in the next 3 years. That's going to open the door for more work as we find out what the defects are with those structures. Are there broken pipes in those structures? Do they need to be rebuilt? We do have the ability to go in and put in those Kalamazoo double inlet structures to resolve some flooding hotspot issues where we have them. We also have plans to start to incorporate green infrastructure with some of our projects coming forward where we have the ability to infiltrate. So I'm switching gears now. We're kind of talking about what happens beyond the storm sewer. So we talked about the storm sewer, the rain comes down, now we're getting into creeks and rivers. So when we talk about riverine flooding, what we're talking about is that flow conveyance within that watershed is more than what that watershed can handle. So if you think of creeks and rivers like nature's storm sewer system, we're kind of looking at those capacity deficiencies there as well. And we can see this with Mother Nature, where there's more flow than what a channel can handle. How much flow can a channel handle? That's dictated by the shape of the channel, what the slope of that channel is, are there obstructions, bends, rivers, things like that, bridges in that channel as well. When we talk about the Kalamazoo River itself, there's a big area. There's a lot of rivershed above us, a lot of watershed above us. This is a map zoomed out. The green area is all the Kalamazoo River watershed, so that means all the rain, all the snowmelt, all the precipitation that hits within that green area is going to come to Kalamazoo and then flow through Kalamazoo. So everything that's to the right of Kalamazoo is flowing into Kalamazoo. Specifically, there's over 1,010 square miles of watershed above Kalamazoo. That river begins out in Hillsdale County, and it flows right into the city. So we talked about a lot of solutions for the storm sewer system. When we talk about Kalamazoo River, it's a little bit beyond us. So there's flow that's coming to us that propagates to the east. Once it's coming out of Battle Creek, it's coming our way. Flooding in Kalamazoo has been a historical occurrence since the 1850s. The Kalamazoo Public Library's got a website dedicated to Kalamazoo River flooding in Kalamazoo since the 1850s. This image here is from either 1904 or 1908. I can't recall which event that was, but this is Vine Street, and it is completely flooded due to channel capacity deficiencies. So we know here in Kalamazoo, when that river goes up, into that flood stage scenario, then it's more than what the river itself can convey. And it is a challenge for us here in Kalamazoo in those flood areas. Floodplain areas in Kalamazoo are those areas that are highlighted within the two shades of kind of that teal to blue color there. So during flood events, when the Kalamazoo River is conveying more flow than what the channel can move, that river flows up into floodplain. And when the river goes up into the floodplain, it just starts to flood everything at a lower elevation. So it can start to back up storm sewers, it can back up basements, it can kind of back up everything because, at that point, that water is kind of seeking level. This is a bit of a snapshot here. This image to the right is a flood cross-section map. And so I'm going to take some time to kind of explain what these lines on the screen are. The very bottom line that's jagged, that kind of goes up and down, that is near the 755 mark, that's the bottom of the channel of the Kalamazoo River. And this is elevation, so we're cross-section looking up. Those horizontal lines that start above 760 and they run all the way up to 765, that's the top of the river at different flood stages. So there's a legend, it may be too small to see, but it talks about different annual chance occurrences. So a 1% annual chance, meaning every single year there's a 1% chance that the Kalamazoo River would exceed that flow volume. That's a 100-year flood. And so those are all marked out on that sheet. The street names along the top that are running vertically along the top, those are showing you cross sections where the river is crossing that street. So that would be like the creek or the river along that street. Those looks like little eyes below the 760 line or across the 760 line. That's the bottom of the bridge and the top of the bridge. So if we're looking at this chart, what is this telling us? It's telling us that the Pitcher Street Bridge, Portage Street Bridge, Walnut Street Bridge, Jutton Street Bridge, Vine Street Bridge, Crosstown Parkway Bridge, and there's more bridges, but I just took that snapshot. Those bridges are all underwater during significant flood events. And if you can kind of put yourself in those neighborhood areas, you stand on Crosstown at Portage Creek, and there's a bike trail that goes through there, so you can stand right there at that intersection and see that creek. If that creek is above that bridge, and that bridge sits higher than that trail, then that water is above everything. It's above the road. The storm sewers are down in the road. The water's above those. And so when everything is at a higher, when the water is at a higher elevation and everything else, that hydraulic pressure is going to push out, and it's going to continue to push out across everything in that floodplain. So if those storm sewers are underwater because the river itself is above the bridge and above the streets, everything connected to those storm sewers is going to be inundated with water. This is a full list of streets that the street itself is lower than the river when the river is in a flood stage. So every one of these streets, we would expect the storm drains in these streets to actually bubble up and flow outward when that river is rising up. Which introduces us to backwater flooding. And so backwater flooding is just the terminology for water that is coming back into the system. Water can come back into the system on Portage Creek from Kalamazoo River. Water can come back into the system from Axtell Creek, from Portage Creek. Water can come back into the system from any one of our outfalls. We have 66 outfalls that are over 30-inch diameter. So 30 inch is, pretty big, it's 2.5 feet in diameter. And so there's over 66 of those just within these floodplain areas. And when we're in that high flood stage, all those can be backwatered back into our neighborhood. Here's an image of a very a very difficult scenario we've faced here in Kalamazoo many, many times. This is an image looking out the window from Bronson Hospital at Portage Creek. That is Vine Street. You're looking at intersection of Vine and Jasper. And so you see that bridge right there itself. The bridge itself is underwater, and the storm drains are under that. And so when this event is occurring, the propagation of this event, as that river level is coming up, as it's going up and up and up, it's pushing its water up through the storm drains. And eventually, everything will seek that level. Here's some drone footage of the 2018 flood event. This drone flight was flown the Tuesday after that Sunday night crest during that 2018 event. And so what we're looking at here, we're looking at the mouth of Portage Creek as it impacts, or as it outlets in the Kalamazoo River at Rose Park, just north of East Michigan. And you see a very different color scenario here. So this kind of very dark water, almost looks like black water Portage Creek compared to that muddy water Kalamazoo, isn't because Portage Creek is polluted. It's because that water is actually clear. And there's a few other shots here where you can see the camera angle's a little bit different. All that water from Portage Creek is clear. So this is just viewed south from that area. You can see the water itself is clear, just going back to that image. The water is clear because the water stops. We were out there during that flood event. We actually saw the moment on Gibson Street where Portage Creek, as it's rising up, it stopped flowing. It stopped flowing out to the Kalamazoo River. And it still had a lot of water in it. It still had a lot of water that was trying to make it to the Kalamazoo River. When that water stopped, and it just stayed still, and it became perfectly clear. You could see the bottom. You could look all the way down at Gibson Street and see the bottom of Portage Creek. What was happening is that Kalamazoo River was coming up. Portage Creek was still trying to get out, and it kind of hit a wall, and so it stopped. It stopped for a period of time, and then after that, it started going backwards, and it started flowing back the other way. So Portage Creek was flowing not to Kalamazoo River, but from Kalamazoo River. And when that was happening, it was flowing down past Walnut, past Jasper, and where was it headed? It was filling the Crosstown Ponds. The Crosstown Ponds sit at an elevation that's lower than the Kalamazoo River when the Kalamazoo River itself is at flood stage. And you can see all that through these events. This is also kind of a depiction of, this is a cross-section, Army Corps Engineer cross-section of that kind of trough as you're looking into the page is the Kalamazoo River channel. And then as you go towards the right, that's Portage Creek outletting in the mouth. And then this area going back is the backwater where you see that once Kalamazoo River is at its full flood stage, it's actually pushing back into Portage Creek. Basement flooding is another big issue that we talked about. We've kind of gone through these events now. The rain, when it comes and it hits hard, overwhelms the storm sewer system. That can be due to a number of contributing factors. The rain now making its way into the creeks and the rivers can overwhelm those creeks and river systems. Part of that overwhelming of those creeks and river systems is the interaction between different creeks and the backwater flooding that can come from one river back up to another one. We also have groundwater. Groundwater is water that's underground. The soil that our homes are built on really is almost like a sponge, and at certain points that sponge can get overwhelmed. This is kind of a snapshot of a monitoring gauge that we have at Crosstown at Stockbridge, 200 West Stockbridge, so that's actually our central pumping station. They're kind of a Crosstown Pond, Stockbridge area, Rose Street area. And you see at the far right side of that chart, the distance depth to water level, feet below land, is less than 2 foot. This is the same chart zoomed in. This was March 27th. You see it at about 5 foot at that time. You see that this chart does react to the amount of water that we pump out of Central. It's a very small reaction. We don't have the ability to really depress the groundwater from our pumping at Central, but we can see some momentary responses as we put different wells on. Obviously, when it rains a lot, like we just experienced, that can have an effect to kind of bring those groundwater levels back up. This is a unique image. This image was put together by the Drain Commission's office. It shows us this kind of a heat map of groundwater levels. So the green is farther or deeper. 8, 10 feet deep before you hit groundwater. The red is 2 feet or less, yellow is 3 to 4 feet. And so you can see we've got some areas that really kind of follow the topography of the land, but also more important than that, they're really soil type specific. And they're also related to either floodplains or historic floodplains that used to exist in Kalamazoo. You can zoom in to some of our neighborhoods. This is an area you see kind of Crosstown Ponds, Balt Street towards the left, just below the A in Kalamazoo. You see that area is really high water table. This is an area that used to be celery farms years and years ago that was converted to housing, a long time ago, was really kind of developed into housing after the 1850s. The Kalamazoo city limit, south city limit, extended south to Stockbridge by the 1850s, and so this area really started to develop. There's really high groundwater, really high water table in this area. We also have areas around Northside where we've got really high water table. So these homes that are in these areas are impacted more heavily or disproportionately impacted when we have those high rain events that overwhelm the storm sewer system because that sponge is already soaked up. So we're kind of drawing those connections between these different types of flood events and what these impacts are to residents because they may be impacted by multiple sources of different events as we propagate through a flood scenario. Some of the things that we can work with residents are discharge approvals for direct connections with storm or sanitary sewer. So we have done projects where we've replaced storm inlets and made connections at the back of the storm inlet so a resident can plug a sump pump into that. Depending on where that sump pump is going, there may be benefit to having a backwater valve in your sewer lateral so that we can prevent a backwater event from happening in the home. We also have some projects that we're collaborating with the county drain commissioner on, specifically on the state ditch and branch drain. So that image is Peppermint Creek. We put a new head wall and a grate there, so it gives us the ability to clean out that creek. That creek, we have noticed that there is a relationship. When that creek gets high, then we start to see that groundwater levels, water tables, and basement floodings starting to be impacted in areas around Patterson Street and areas around the state ditch and branch drain. There's also a project that the city is partnering with the Drain Commission on to install an extension of this drain that will go between Prouty and Dunkley, and then between Cobb and Woodward to address basement flooding in those areas. And then, there's also additional solutions, but those solutions may vary based on foundation type. Again, residents that are in these areas that are kind of the red shaded areas are more likely to be impacted by high groundwater, which is also more likely to be impacted when there's either operational structural deficiencies in that storm sewer system. So big picture, there's a lot to work on here. There was a plan in place developed by the Army Corps of Engineers. That plan was completed in 1967. Some plans dated as late as 1970 to widen, straighten, and deepen Kalamazoo River and Portage Creek through Kalamazoo. That would have solved pretty much all the flooding problems that we're talking about here today. They would have lowered the Kalamazoo River so much that there would have had to been a low flow check dam at Parchment, because in the summertime there would be no water left in the river. So that low flow check dam design was put in place to keep water in the river so that there would be fish and things in the summertime. That project was ultimately scrapped. It was scrapped because of the contamination. There was PCB contamination discovered in Kalamazoo River, and the project was deemed ultimately unfeasible in 1972. So it's been a while. 1972 has been some years ago. The fact that there was a solution in place may have been lost over time. Good news is that EPA has stood by their word, and they have worked to clean up all of that contamination. So in the fall 2024, we crossed that line of having all the contamination cleaned up out of the Kalamazoo River and Portage Creek. We've been working through the years over the last 8 years with partnerships with National Weather Service, USGS, and Army Corps of Engineers to incrementally work towards solutions and to study solution alternatives for Kalamazoo River. One of the first things that we had to do was understand those dynamics between the Kalamazoo River and Portage Creek. We funded additional gauge stations and continue to fund gauge stations on the Kalamazoo River so that we can monitor real-time events, so that we can create data logs of historic information, and then also work together to create a bathymetric survey and a HEC-RAS model of this interaction so that we could test flood solution alternatives. 2019 to 2023, we continue to work together with the county, with those other agencies to develop flood mitigation alternatives and to kind of get these published in plans, ultimately getting it published in the Kalamazoo County Hazard Mitigation Plan. So our solutions for large, long-term flooding alternatives has been adopted by the county in the county hazard mitigation plan. This then opened the door for us to receive the WRDA Act, and that was signed into Congress federally that supports a project in Kalamazoo in continued education and planning study alternatives to work towards that. So specifically that WRDA, the Water Resources Development Act, authorizes Army Corps engineers to study Kalamazoo River watershed. So with these big federal agencies that are out there doing all this work, they're not authorized to do work for us until they've got the funding to do it. So there's several steps between studying, designing, engineering before we get to construction. So there's a whole lot of work that's got to go into this, and that work cannot start until there is a funding bill and appropriation to get in place. So that work has now started, and we are continuing on that pathway. There's been a whole lot of work that we've been working on since 2018. This is just a list of stuff that we've been working towards, kind of making those incremental steps towards that ultimate solution. And one of the last items on here is April 2026, WRDA letter of intent submittal. So that was a match, a local match, and Army Corps engineer funding that's going to come together, $3 million to fund some study of the Kalamazoo River flooding area. That work's also going to include non-riverine urban flooding, so those first slides I talked about, and it's also going to include a project that we're looking at for storm sewer capacity deficiencies in specific neighborhoods. So a whole lot of work happening and a whole lot of work into the future. And City Manager, turn it back over to you for questions.
Thank you, Director Baker. Anything you wanted to add, Manager Hankins?
Thank you, Mayor. No, there was staff did a lot of work to evaluate how to present something that was useful to you all. I want you to know that I've sat through a couple of iterations with Director Baker, learning myself. I think that they've done a great job of trying to present something that can be digested not only by you, but by the community as well. So welcome your questions if you have any.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you, also very, very helpful. I have to say that I think this attention to this issue has never been as focused as it has been over the last few years here, and I really appreciate and recognize that. Questions from commissioners relative to this? Yes, Commissioner Slaby.
Director Baker, thank you so much. Always good with presentations. I think this was really timely based on what we've been experiencing lately. And I also think it sounds like we really haven't had a presentation that's been focused on this topic in a while. Honestly, I don't think you could do anything better besides bringing some sponges and water to the table and do an interactive demonstration for us. I just had a couple points I wanted to seek clarification on for the people watching and in the audience. Looking at riverine flooding, You had mentioned that, you know, a lot of that is out of our control. And what I understand that to mean is, you know, upstream, if another community is super overdeveloped, right, and they cause immense runoff issues, that's going to impact us downstream. And we really can't control what other communities are necessarily doing to address that. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's correct. That's based on the size of our watershed. And just to talk through an example, let's just create a scenario hypothetically. If Hillsdale, Hillsdale's not very developed, that's kind of a farm community. If Hillsdale got an insane amount of rain, say 16 inches of rainfall just there, but it was, you know, big enough area there, that would come to us and it would flood us. And so there are, you know, some very real challenges of being downstream where we are and having 1,000 square miles of watershed that are above us.
Are there examples of communities, whether in Michigan or elsewhere, where they cooperate with one another to address some of these concerns?
Yes, you know, there are, I think, there are examples even in Michigan. You know, I'm thinking of the Huron River, where there's several communities that kind of come together to create kind of some of the same standards on development and some of that stuff. So that's certainly a welcome approach. I will also tell you that the WRDA bill that we're working on, Battle Creek is part of that. And so we're kind of working with Battle Creek, and, you know, not to go too far into all the details of that, but Battle Creek had their flooding problem solved already, so that there was a 1947 flood. It was very impactful for both Battle Creek and Kalamazoo, and that flood really kind of started the efforts by the Army Corps of Engineers to create solutions. Battle Creek was built first because of its upstream, and they got that work done in Battle Creek, and they didn't do Kalamazoo because of the contamination. So Battle Creek actually won't flood. Battle Creek, from a riverine standpoint, can convey over 11,000 cubic feet per second. Kalamazoo, on the other hand, we start to see impacts above 3,000 cubic feet per second. We go into official flood stage at 4,500 cubic feet per second. So, you know, Battle Creek can do 11,000 CFS, kind of keeping their feet kicked up, and we're really struggling through it. So they have some environmental concerns in Battle Creek. They really want to look at that concrete river. They also have safety concerns. There's been a number of fatalities in that concrete river. So there's a lot of work that they want to do there in Battle Creek, but they understand that relationship between that flow conveyance and how that's going to come downstream to us. And so that working these two projects together, the environmental safety improvements in Battle Creek, and then the improvements for flood conveyance and ecological improvements in Kalamazoo as well. And so having those two communities work together.
Thank you. I was going to bring up the Battle Creek River Channel redesign, so I'll take that off my list. I had a question around storm drain. As you said, all of these things are happening all at once. And so I wanted to better understand when you talked about the river being higher than the street. If we had an example, I know we have old stormwater infrastructure and things need to be repaired. Let's just take an example. If we had a perfectly great storm drain, clear, no repairs needed. When you were describing the river being higher than the street and already filling up that storm drain, even in a good scenario where that storm drain is perfectly, you know, fine and clear, because the water has risen so high, so fast, is the idea that even in that scenario, the water just cannot be displaced at that time, and there's still going to be flooding.
Correct. In those scenarios where we're either in a backwater event or a riverine flooding event, and the water surface elevation or flood stage is higher than the ground around it or the roads around it, including those connected infrastructure features from outfall to inlet. All those storm inlets are connected to storm outfalls. Those storm outfalls are connected to riverine elements. So when those flood surface elevation goes above the inlet, it's going to come back out the inlet. Some real interesting things we learned during the 2018 flood was that the fish were actually coming out of the storm sewers. And so we drove a loader up to Bronson Hospital to take sandbags to Bronson Hospital, and we drove down Vine and Jasper Street, and the loader operator stopped because there were fish in the road and didn't want to run over the fish. We also, as the floodwaters were receding, crews were dumping fish back into the storm structure on the intersection of Forest at Park Street because the fish were coming out of the crosstown ponds there, and we're putting them back into the ponds there. And for the record, city crews put back every fish that they found, and we didn't find one fish that didn't make it back into the ponds or river or Portage Creek.
Except those fish fries, right?
Yeah, except for those.
Okay. Okay, and of course, we do acknowledge that we need to replace a lot of our storm drain infrastructure, and there is need of repair. But even in a good scenario where that storm drain is great, if the river is taller than that,
It's coming
there's
back.
going to be a flood.
Yep.
Last question that I had was, I know a couple years ago, you guys went out to bid for an assessment on the storm drains that need to be relined, et cetera. It looks like you have that listed here, so I was just curious if you kind of share kind of the status of where we're at with that. Have we begun relining, where, like, geographically where we are? How much do we have to go to have that completed?
We've done, so broad numbers, we've got about 300 miles of stormwater pipe in our system. We've lined somewhere less than 10 miles of that. And so we've really focused on some of the worst areas where there was structural defects, so a lot of cracks in pipe, that sort of thing, and also areas where there was high water table. So we did a lot of work around, some of the floodplain areas that you see there. As we do that, over the next 3 years, as we clean those 11,000 structures, you're going to see more work coming from that. So there'll be structural replacement, lining, manhole replacement. Now the good news with all that work, all those work scopes, is that we already do all that work in wastewater, and we've got standing contracts already with contractors. So we've got manhole lining, monoform contracts. We've got contracts for sewer lining. So we're able to kind of package and award that work out relatively easily, and it's just a matter of going out there and working through those inspections and those cleaning aspects to continue on that work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Slaby, other questions, commissioners? Vice Mayor Duncan.
So what are the options for our residents in the meantime? Obviously, this is an issue. Just this week alone, several residents have reached out to me. And while it's not the city's fault, right, like we can't change the flooding of the river, like what can we do in the meantime as this fix is, being queued up?
Sure. I'm going to go back to the slide that we talk about. It was the urban non-riverine flooding. It talked about just some of the solutions that we're working on to kind of hit some of those bullet points there. So some of these, we're dealing with infrastructure. There's going to be very few scenarios. It's very unlikely that we're going to be able to go send a crew to a home tomorrow and make repairs and prevent all flooding from ever happening again. So there's some things that have been very persistent and very challenging for some of our residents. Depending on where that home is, we've got 22 neighborhoods in Kalamazoo. these 22 neighborhoods are all different elevations and they're all different flood areas. And so there could be some low-hanging fruit in some of those areas. There could be some things where residents could install rain barrels or rain gardens to get that flow from their property out of the storm sewer system. And if they've got soil that will perk and they're able to infiltrate some of that stuff, that could work. There are some nature-based solutions that could be done at the homeowner level that could help with some of this stuff. There's some, catch basin cleaning, that work that I talked about that's going to start this summer. That work could have some very positive results in some areas where there's either operational defects or structural defects that are very obvious and evident that the crews can respond to. We also have targeted capital improvements in some hot spots. I can share with you that Patterson, the intersection with Woodward, the intersection with Cobb, and the intersection with Church Street are on our radar. That's something that we're looking for improvements similar to the improvements that we did on Church at Hopkins. So something like this would be a solution that we would implement in some of those areas. In terms of this construction season, this summer, that's not likely. Most of our construction season is already packed. That has due to a storm that we had last year that pushed us behind on local paving. So we're doing 2025 paving this summer as well. So we're doing our 2025 paving and our 2026 paving this year together. We've got a lot of great work on sidewalks that we're also pushing out there. So this work is all done by the same crew. So this would be adding more projects to that already piled on list. Very likely these projects could go into next year. There's also a need to coordinate some of this stuff with sanitary sewer. So we don't want to go dig up an intersection and fix this, but not have that sanitary sewer work done too. So we've got to coordinate some of the sanitary sewer infrastructure work with that. We've got to coordinate that with those CIP budgets. So there are solutions. Those solutions vary by address, by neighborhood, by watershed, by elevation. But we want to continue to share with the community that we've got projects, we're working on things. We want to hear from those neighbors. So Vice Mayor, please get in touch with me. I want to know what's going on there and to see, is there a solution that we have, that we offer, that we can implement? There may be, but we're just going to have to dive into some more details on those specific locations.
Thanks, helpful. Other questions? Commissioner Hess? No? No questions from over here? Just want to give everyone a first shot here before we go back. All set? Commissioner Slaby?
Well, thank you to Vice Mayor Duncan. I just wanted to confirm for the people watching, when it comes to reporting, what's the best way to report where there's flooding? Is it 311? And so if someone comes out of their house, it's raining, they see it's flooding, should they be reporting this to the city? And when it's not raining and not necessarily flooding, but they notice, oh, this storm drain looks really clogged, should they be reporting? Who's the responsibility fall on in regards to that? Because I know in some communities, neighbors will take turns clearing it out. And so I know that we have different responsibilities for sidewalk clearance, et cetera. So just curious, if someone saw a defect or something clogged in the storm drain, should they be calling 311 and reporting that for somebody to come out and clean?
Sure. So the answer is going to vary by when it happens. So in terms of a storm sewer response, call to 311, that's a non-emergency call. That call would only be answered during business hours, Monday through Friday. And then that would create a work order to Public Works for a plug drain. If it's after hours or on the weekend and that flooding is impacting traffic, impacting safety, or impacting motor vehicles, that call would be a non-emergency call, but to public safety. And then we'll work with public safety. That would be a flooded intersection not passable to traffic. And then that's going to work through us. We are launching a adopt a drain pilot in the Oakwood neighborhood this summer. So that's something that we really are excited about. We're working with community plan and economic development on that. So that's going to kind of open the door to having at a neighborhood level the ability to interact and adopt that drain and kind of keep it clear of debris and stuff like that. We did see that from this rain event that happened Friday night into Saturday. The rain came down with such intensity. There's still some residual leaves out there, and we saw a lot of plugged inlet. Public safety was actually out. Public safety, not public services, was out raking inlets and cleaning drains and calling me, and we got Public Works out there then, which is, Public Works has a little bit different response time than public safety, and so it takes us a little bit longer to get moving on some of that stuff.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it again. Just a few questions from me then. I appreciate, first of all, I was going to ask about the adopted drain, and you are piloting that. What's that going to look like in terms of how you're going to move that forward and literally giving someone an opportunity to volunteer to adopt a couple storm drain inlets?
I've got some handouts here. I'll share them just in case you ask that question. And this is stuff that's going to kind of more to come.
Yes.
But this is going to kind of open the door and should give you just a snapshot of how that's going to look, what it's going to look like. So I'll pass it.
Great, helpful. You can give it to Clerk Watson. She pass around. A couple other things, Director Baker, I just wanted to ask about. You know, we so often talk about the dam upstream from us and releases from the dam. Is that something, and we talk about partnerships, is that something that we work with people on, or are those dam releases out of our control? Because sometimes it seems like it happens and then suddenly it's got a detrimental effect on us downstream and you wonder why they did it or why they did as much as they did, that kind of thing.
Sure, that is actually a great question. First of all, the dam, Morrow Dam, that's what we're talking about. That's located in Comstock Township. It's privately owned. That's a hydroelectric dam, so that uses kind of the water level of the river to drive turbines to create green, renewable energy. That dam is what's known as a run-of-the-river dam. So it is not a flood control dam. It does not hold back water. It has a permitted elevation with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, where they have to maintain a water surface elevation. They can't go below it, they can't go above it. So it's run of the river. Whatever the river does, whatever water comes in has to come out. And so they've got this level, this set point they have to maintain by law. And so when more water comes into Morrow Pond from Battle Creek, they got to let it out. And the dam is a mechanical structure. It's got gates. The gates are, the gates are either open or closed, right? And so we're going to see that flow. The difference between kind of a natural flow that just kind of slowly rises through the day, you kind of see that happening over time. It's very natural. It's kind of more of a linear approach. When they open a gate, there's an immediate response to it. And so I think it's, if you look at kind of the flow charts, it's like stair steps, right? It's not like one smooth transition up to the next level. It's these steps that happen. Those steps have to happen because that's water that's coming into Morrow. They're required by law to maintain a certain level. They maintain that level by either letting out more flow or holding back more flow. So they're trying to gauge the flow that's coming to them, and they're just maintaining their level. We do communicate with the folks at Morrow Dam. They have a high flow kind of protocol so that they're talking to us when that is happening. We also, Public Services and Public Safety together are in communication with National Weather Service. Anytime we get flows that are going to be higher, we've got kind of high flow protocols where when certain flows start to hit Battle Creek, I'll start getting alerts on my phone, and then we start talking about, okay, what does that look like in Kalamazoo? It takes about 24 hours for flow from Battle Creek to get to Morrow Dam, and it takes about 24 hours for flow in Morrow Dam to get out of Morrow Dam. So we have, under most normal circumstances, somewhere between 24 and 48 hours notice of any kind of significant high event. I would also remind everybody that flooding events are weather events, and so stay tuned to your National Weather Service. Look for things like flood watches, flood warnings. They're going to be telling you what to expect. I think another thing to keep in mind is our location within the watershed. So when we have all that rain, and there's 1,000 square miles of watershed above us, we don't see the immediate reaction from the river. So it's going to be a nice sunny day on Tuesday or Wednesday morning when we hit 8 foot on the Kalamazoo River. That may surprise some folks because it rained on Friday night and Saturday, not on Wednesday. But it just takes time for all that flow to get here and then to get out of Morrow to us. So a bit of a long-winded answer, but we are in communication with the dam. There's nothing they can really do. They've got to let it out. They're not designed for that. And if they ever tried to just save it all in there, that could be extremely catastrophic if that dam was topped.
Okay, that's helpful. I appreciate that, because you hear all kinds of things about Morrow Dam and how, why did they do that? They released the water and it hurt us. Why did they just keep it there? So they can't really do that. A bigger picture, kind of decades-long drier and wetter cycles, which have happened over the course of time. Are we in the midst of anything related to all that right now, or have we kind of reverted to a mean? Where are we at in terms of, drought versus wetter times and what effect that might have?
Sure. So there's a few different things happening. Certainly we've got broad periods of, dry or wet, drought, for example. Kind of looking back through time, 1930s into 1960s were kind of a really dry period. We saw a lot of development that was happening in the 1960s in Kalamazoo when we were in a dry period. We also had a lot of paper companies in the 1960s that were all withdrawing water out of the Portage Creek watershed and Kalamazoo River watershed because they had their own water supplies, had their own wells, they had their own intakes. So that Allied site had intakes at Portage Creek, had its own intakes in the groundwater. The King Mill, which has been gone, I think, longer than I've been alive, had its own intakes in the Kalamazoo River and all these other places. So there's a lot of industrial use of water in our area during times of drought that also depressed water tables even further, that gave folks, maybe a little bit different perspective on whether or not they could build a foundation in and around some of these lower areas. Fast forward to, wet cycles, 1980s through about 1986 was wet. 1988 was a drought year, and that kicked off a dry period that lasted well into the 1990s. Late 1990s into early 2000s were kind of more normal, back and forth. 2008 to 2012 was a wet period. If you remember, we had a flood in 2008. 2012 then kicked off another dry period, and we were dry up through about 2017. 2017 changed things around, and we were extremely wet, so wet from 2017 to 2022, our annual average numbers actually increased. And so it actually kind of moved the needle in response to how wet it is. Since 2022, we've been kind of back and forth. We're kind of modulating around a little bit. One of the things we are looking at even recently, and this has continued even beyond 2022, is our annual peak exceedance are going up. So what does that mean in terms of stream flow is that it may, independent of whether it's dry or wet, the spikes of high flow events, the number of those are increasing every year. So if you look at just Portage Creek, and rain events that cause the Portage Creek to go into high flow scenarios. We're getting more of those every year, and those are more impactful every year. And so that is a trend we're watching. We think it's kind of related back to some of these storm events we're having, and where we see rain events, storm events, thunderstorm events, where there's more of them happening, and they seem to be dropping more intense rainfalls when they happen.
Okay, so that's something else to watch too then. So I don't want to get too ahead of you with the last thing here, but a lot of work, a lot of funding needed. When you're talking about Act 51, I guess that's kind of peeling some funding out of what could be roads funding when you're using that for storm sewer work. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. So as you look ahead and imagine, do we have enough funding in our budget to do ultimately the work that we need to do, and what does that look like going forward? Any thoughts about all that?
Sure. In your packets, I believe in your packets, there's a draft stormwater business plan. And it's a draft state, and it's just kind of high level looks at what are some of these needs in the stormwater utility, and what would funding those needs look like. And so from a high level, we've identified that, stormwater really needs to be looked at as a utility. You've got infrastructure. That infrastructure needs to be maintained, operated, and reinvested on, routine intervals. And so there needs to be funding for that. Historically, storm sewer system in Kalamazoo was either funded by streets or general fund. It's been very challenging to continue funding stormwater through general fund. It's something that has a high impact from streets, although there's other benefits, other funds that come into play with that as well. And that's something that we wanted to be very actionable on some of these regulatory requirements under our Michigan Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, or MS4. So we are actually under EGLE requirements to do that storm structure cleaning. So that's work that has to happen. And given the timeline of community need by our residents, regulatory requirements, really kind of set the stage and provided that justification to use Act 51 funding to stay focused on maintaining this infrastructure. Now, to your point, Mayor, long term, could we pave more streets if we had another funding source for stormwater? Yes, the answer is yes to that. We could certainly take those streets dollars further with pavement if there was another funding mechanism for stormwater. But I think that's a question that's still out there and something for us to continue to look at as the years continue.
Thank you so much, Director Baker. I really appreciate your answers. Anything else, Commissioner, at this time? Manager Hankins.
No, thank you, and I appreciate the dialogue and the questions, and anything that you need as far as process going forward. The complaint process, we'll lay that out and make sure that everyone knows how to get concerns to Director Baker so we can address those.
Thanks again, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Commissioners, now is an opportunity for commissioner comments. Just a reminder for anyone watching, there's also a commissioner comment period at the end of our business meeting that starts at 7. Any commissioner comments for the Committee of the Whole? Commissioner Slaby.
I thought I'd do it now because I don't know how long our next meeting is going to be, and I don't want to wait until, listen. Okay, so I just wanted to share that I had a really good time in DC representing City of Kalamazoo at the National Leagues of Cities Conference, which is held annually. It was an opportunity to meet with thousands of other municipalities across the country, hear from really good keynote speakers that represented, from state legislators to federal legislators. So it was an opportunity to connect with other groups like railroads and airports and other, public transit systems to talk about what's going on across the country, what funding is available, and so it was exciting to see what resources are there. I know we do a really good job at connecting with, federal and state governments to receive funding, but I think there's just, always continue to be opportunities for us to explore more, and so it was a great it was a great thing to be a part of, and, you know, would love to, look forward to sharing some contacts with City Manager Hankins from what I was able to share and receive while there.
Thanks so much, Commissioner Slaby. I'm glad you were able to go to that. At this point, we are adjourned, and we will reconvene as we start our business meeting at 7.
Rather than actually get here, how things get in office.
Exactly. And look at, he's already achieved it. And the EDC,
That's
This vice mayor. The Drew Duncan, that's up for consideration.